right, everybody should be able to see the screen. It should be shared with you. If you can't, please let me know. Feel free to put it in the chat if you are having any trouble seeing anything, but you should be able to see it now. All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. I appreciate you taking some time on your lunch to come and learn more about conservation districts, conservation district leadership, and governance. Um, if anybody can't hear me at any point in time, just put something in the chat. Our co-host today is Amber Butterfield. She is our grants administrator here at MACD, and she will be helping me throughout, answering questions in the chat, muting and unmuting people as necessary, and can help with any other technical issues that we have so I can focus on the presentation. My name is Rivka Hodgkinson, and I am the executive director for the Michigan Association of Conservation Districts. I also serve as a board member at Ottawa Conservation District and have for the last couple of years, and have served on state council, which I resigned that position on state council when I became executive director, but I've kind of seen the governance and leadership of conservation districts from all sides, and hopefully will make it more understandable for all of you. We will definitely have time at the end for questions, so please make note of your questions as we go. And if I don't answer anything during the presentation, I'll be excited to chat with you more about it. So what are conservation districts is the first question. Any of you who are in the conservation district world already, this is going to just be a reminder for you. But for those of you who aren't, conservation districts are the key delivery system of natural resource management services in the state of Michigan. So what does that mean on a practical level? That means that conservation districts help our fellow Michiganders conserve their land and water so our environment can be cleaner, healthier, economically stronger place to live, work, and grow for our community. Conservation districts are authorized by the Michigan Public Act 297 of 1937, and they are locally organized special purpose units of state government. So basically, the history of conservation districts is that during the Dust Bowl, it was realized that we needed locally led conservation of land and water resources. It started out as soil conservation districts so that communities would be able to prevent future things like the Dust Bowl from happening in their community. So we work with a lot of state and federal and private sector resources and programs to solve today's conservation challenges. How is all of this organized? Michigan is a really big state, as anybody who lives in Michigan knows. And it's always fun to me when I talk to people outside of conservation districts or outside of Michigan, they're very surprised how big the state of Michigan is. It literally takes as much time for me to drive from my home in Holland, Michigan, which is in the southwest corner of the state, all the way up to the tip of the UP, as it would for me to drive from my home to New York City. So that just provides that scale of how big the state is. And in order to do work that big, we need leadership across the whole entire state. So the 83 counties of Michigan are divided into 75 districts that are all locally led districts within the state of Michigan. So you'll note there are 83 counties. That's because some counties have combined districts. So for example, Iron County and Baraga County in the UP have a single conservation district, Iron Baraga Conservation District. And there are a handful of districts that are combined districts throughout the state. Each of these districts is led by a 5-member board of directors that is independently and locally elected. So in the 1990s, there was some talk about moving conservation district elections onto the general ballot. And the legislature at that time decided no, they wanted to maintain conservation districts having their elections at the local level and run as independent elections that are separate from any other elections in the state. And this is where a lot of confusion comes in. When I was running for the conservation district in Ottawa County, for example, I would talk to people and say, you can either vote at the annual meeting or you can send in an absentee ballot. And they would say, well, I'm already signed up for absentee ballots in the state of Michigan. And I would need to explain to them that this is a completely different system that is outside of that absentee ballot system, outside of the county clerk system that you have, and that is based on state law. So that is how the state law works for conservation district elections. So when those elections are going to be completely dependent on your local conservation district. Those elections are held on an annual basis, not for all 5 seats. Typically, it's either 2 seats or 1 seat. It'll be 2 seats, 2 seats, 1 seat, 0 seats over a 4-year term. Each of those conservation district board members are elected for a 4-year term and in a rolling cycle. So the first step is to get in touch with your local conservation district to find out what their schedule for their annual meetings are. And you always have an option to vote either in person at the annual meeting or to vote by absentee ballot that you request from the district. And we'll get into that in a little more detail in a minute. So we have these 5-member boards of directors at each of the 75 conservation districts. The whole state is broken into 10 regions. And so those regions of the state are led by state council members, which are elected regionally. And then the entire state elects the executive committee for MACD. So MACD, you'll see, is in the middle of all of this. How do we fit into this whole thing? Well, MACD is a nonprofit organization that is here to support the conservation districts. So we are a 501c3 organization. We provide support for all 75 conservation districts, but we're an independent nonprofit organization, which means that we are able to help apply for funding that nonprofits are eligible for. We're able to help advocate on both the state and the national level with legislators. We're able to help provide statewide coordination for locally driven efforts and identify opportunities for collaboration and partnership between the districts and with our partners. So each conservation district operates completely independently on their own, and then MACD is a support and resource for conservation districts statewide as a whole. So how can you get involved? You say, all right, this sounds great. I really care about conservation. I'm passionate about the environment. I want to make sure our water and our soil are healthy and that we have these resources for future generations. But I'm still confused. What do I need to do? Well, the first thing to do is to connect with your local district. And generally speaking, if you go into Google and say Ionia County Conservation District or Iron County Conservation District or Washtenaw County Conservation District or Gratiot County Conservation District, you're going to find your local district. You can also look on macd.org. There's a directory at the top and it gives you the whole list of counties, and you can click on your county and find the contact information for your district. So connect with your local district wherever that may be. You're going to want to ask them about their annual meetings and elections. When do they hold their annual meeting? Typically, it's around the same time of year for that district, but different districts throughout the state hold their annual meetings at different times. So there are people who have them in the spring, summer, fall, just about throughout the entire year. You have conservation districts having annual meetings. So you want to ask when their annual meeting are and when their election cycle is. So if you are interested in being a part of the board, finding out about where they're at in their election cycle is important. Typically, they have a period of time before that election that they need to submit petitions for election for all of the potential candidates and get that information out. All of the board meetings for conservation districts are public and publicly noticed. So you will be able to go to any of their board meetings and attend and get an idea of how the board works. You want to ask if they have any current vacancies. If boards have existing vacancies in that 5-member board, they can appoint someone to fill that vacancy. So if for whatever reason they have 4 members or 3 members instead of the full 5, and you're interested in running, I would submit a letter of interest and a resume and say, here's my qualifications, here's why I want to serve on the board, attend a board meeting, and see if you can step in as an appointed board member. Some districts also have associate board members, which are not voting members, but can still help support the board, participate in conversations, can utilize their resources as a board member to help advance the district. And of course, keep up to date on their programs, participate, share, and support. A lot of conservation districts throughout the state do all kinds of educational resources and workshops, everything from, mushrooms to edible plant identification and foraging to native plant planting to how to create a rain garden to how to identify invasive species in your area and everything in between. So your conservation district probably has programs going on near you that you can participate in, share with others, and support those events. Some of the better known conservation district programs you may have heard of. This is a whole long list of just some of the things that go on at conservation districts. And sometimes I have people come up to me and say, well, conservation districts, do you have anything to do with the MEEP program, for example? And conservation districts are the ones who run that program. So if you've heard of any of these programs, MEEP, CSP, EQIP, Produce Safety, Forestry Assistance Program, Envirothon, Regional Conservation Partnership Program, farmer-led group, CISMA, which is the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, soil and sedimentation programs, transition to organic partnership programs, MyFarmLink, and many, many more. There's likely a conservation district connected to that program in your area. Now, not every conservation district runs every program because it's based on what your local needs are in your local community. So who can be elected or appointed to these seats? The requirements to be on the board are really simple. You must be a resident of the county. That's the only requirement to run for this elected office. You do need to collect and submit 5 signatures by the election deadline for your election petition. And again, check with your local district to find out when their schedule is and when they hold their elections. But the important thing that I want to share here is that a wide range of skills and experience can be helpful for districts. So we have a lot of farmers on our board, and they are very trusted members of the community and a critical, important piece of the board. But if you say, well, I'm not a farmer, or I've never run for elected office before, or I've never been on a board before, that doesn't mean that you are not a valuable member of that board. So if you have financial experience, business experience, grant management or nonprofit experience, agricultural experience, an environmental background, if you are a teacher, if you enjoy working with people, if you have sales and marketing experience, all of those things are going to be useful for your boards in helping build the conservation district with your unique skills and helping your district be more successful. So if you have a passion for this work and you're willing to put in the time and effort to be a member of the board and put those skills to work for your board, then you should consider running. Local leadership matters for a lot of reasons, and conservation districts really take advantage of that local leadership and local connection to ensure that conservation districts are able to support their communities in the best way possible. So here's just a few of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about the importance of local leadership and why the conservation district system works when we have great leaders in place at that local level. You can respond to local needs. Conservation district boards are made up of community members. So you understand the unique challenges and opportunities in your area. You're able to build trust and connection. You have relationships with other people in your community, can help tell them about the conservation district, can help explain to them conservation district programs, and help get buy-in and support from your community. Drives on the ground impact. Local leaders can help make sure that conservation practices are implemented where they're needed most. As board members, one of the things that you make decisions about is looking at grant opportunities and funding opportunities and programs and having influence on where those programs are implemented in your community. You can promote equity and representation. It's important that everyone in the community is represented at the conservation district so that everybody has a seat at the table and has their voice heard, and that no areas of your community are left out of the conversation. And so having people from a diverse set of backgrounds, experience, helps ensure that those voices are represented and everybody gets a seat at the table in making conservation decisions for your community. Pathways for advocacy. In order to be on state council or the executive committee or higher levels of leadership at conservation districts, the first step is being elected to your local board. So bringing those regional issues to the state level starts by being on the board at your local level. And strengthens the conservation network. So engaged board members build strong relationships with partners, funders, and legislators. And I've seen this time and time again in conservation districts throughout the state, that those boards are able to build those relationships with other local partners who are also doing conservation and environmental related work. And it makes everybody more successful at what they're doing when they work together. Here in Ottawa County, just as one example, because this is my home county, we have great relationships with places like the Outdoor Discovery Center and the Macatawa Watershed Council, and Elgrow, and a lot of the other community organizations that are also working on protecting our water, protecting our soil, building water accessibility and availability. And we work really directly with our county as well. And so those partnerships are really dependent on strong board members who can do that advocacy and outreach and make those connections between different parts of the community. So we've talked about locally led conservation on a county by county level. So what is this state council? And this is the part that even if you're on a board currently at a conservation district, you may have questions about exactly how state council works, what state council does, and the kinds of things that they're responsible for. So in order to be a member of state council, you first have to be a director on a local board. So step one is run for election on your local conservation district board and get elected. Once you're on that local board, then you have an opportunity to run for state council. So these positions are for chair, vice chair, or secretary treasurer at the region level. So this map shows you the breakdown of where the 10 regions are in the state of Michigan. There's about 8 counties, more or less, in each region. Some have a couple more, some have a couple less, depending on the region. But each of these collection of counties then are represented by those state council members, the chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer. Again, the first thing to do is find out from your local board who is in those positions of chair, vice chair, and secretary, treasurer. And if there is a vacancy, and once you are an elected board member, and if you already are an elected board member, you should definitely have your state council list of who your representatives are. And if there's a vacancy and you're like, I'm a director on my local county and I want to get more involved, and we don't have one of those positions filled, reach out to the chair of your region and say, hey, I'm interested in serving as vice chair or secretary treasurer, and I see that position is vacant right now. What can I talk to you about getting appointed? And here's the reasons why I want to be a part of the bigger picture of conservation district governance. So some of the responsibilities of the state council include communication between the state and local level. So communicating what's happening in those regions with MACD and saying, here's our local challenges as a region. Here are our successes as a region. Here's some of the things going on here. As well as communicating from the state level back to their districts that are in their region. So saying, here is the advocacy work that's going on. Here is some of the statewide opportunities that's going on. Here are the things that we're discussing at a state level, and all of that shared at the state council meetings, which are quarterly. Typically, we have been doing 3 of those virtually and 1 in person. Sometimes in the past, they've all been in person. It kind of varies on that, but it's 2 days, once a quarter, that we're doing quarterly state council meetings so that we can talk about all of the big picture statewide things that are happening region to region, and then on a statewide basis. And the coordination that happens here at these state council meetings is all about trying to get that collaboration and coordination statewide on resolutions, on advocacy, on priorities, on opportunities that affect the whole state as a whole. Region meetings are planned annually. And again, you're going to want to talk to your local conservation district as your starting point. You can look at this map and know which region you're a part of and say, hey, when is the region meeting coming up? If you're a director, I strongly encourage you, for those of you who are already directors, to make sure you find out when your region meeting is this year and attend your region meeting. The best person to reach out for that is your chair for your region, but if you have trouble contacting them or you're not sure where to start, you can also reach out to me or Amber directly, and we can help you find out when your region meeting is. Directors going to those region meetings are their best opportunity to connect with other directors in their region, as well as to be elected for state council if that's something that's of interest to you. The state council members are 2-year terms and are elected. So the directors are 4-year terms, state council are 2-year terms, and they're elected for on even years for odd regions and odd years for even regions. Hopefully I said that right. It's a tongue twister. But that's kind of how that schedule goes back and forth. So we have that consistency throughout the state in that representation. So then the last layer of all of this governance, you have the locally led 5-member boards with possible associate board members at the local level, the 10 regions in the state that are comprised of directors from those locally led boards, and then the executive committee. The executive committee consists of president, vice president, and treasurer. Our current president is Jerry Miller. Our current vice president is Steve Law, and our current treasurer is Nancy Sixai. They are all directors at their individual districts. Jerry is in Kent County, Steve is in Jackson County, and Nancy is in Genesee County. Anyone who is a director can run for the executive committee. In order to run for the executive committee, they must be nominated by at least 3 districts in the state with a letter of support. They are voted in for 2-year terms at the General Assembly at the annual meeting by the directors that are in attendance at the annual meeting. So this is the one time that, like I said, when we have state council, we have 3 meetings virtually, 1 in person. The 1 in person is also when we have our annual meeting. It's when we also have our annual conference. And it's when we get everybody in the whole entire state together. This year's meeting, the annual business meeting, is going to be at December 8th at Shanty Creek in Bel Air, Michigan. And it's going to be at the beginning kickoff of the conference for our 3-day conference on conservation that's open to everybody. Next year is going to be in Lansing in October. Each district throughout the state gets 1 vote for who they want to vote for each of those executive committee positions. And their responsibilities include managing the executive director, managing me. So they are responsible for hiring the executive director, providing me my employee evaluations, etc., as well as playing a key role in advocacy. I can tell you so many things would not happen without the support of the executive committee and attending meetings in Lansing, supporting our legislative action day, talking to legislators and partners. They just provide really key support for me in my role as executive director, and all of those day-to-day business decisions that are just the little things that need to happen on a day-to-day basis to keep everything rolling. So that is all of my planned material to kind of give you that big picture of how all of this functions. And I'm going to go back to, let me see if I can go back to the slide that has our the 75 districts, 5-member boards, MACD, 10 regions, state council, but I can flip back to anything and I'll go ahead and open up for questions and we can open the floor to whatever questions you have about anything we covered and anything we didn't cover on the governance of conservation districts. So Michigan, Susan is at Wayne County Conservation District. She said in the chat, Wayne County districts, there are several states that do have a Wayne Conservation District. That is true. Michigan is always helpful. That is true for several counties in Michigan. That's a good point, Susan. When you search, if you just do a Google search, make sure you put Wayne County, Michigan, or Ottawa County, Michigan, or Lenawee County, Michigan, because it's true. There are a lot of, especially if you have some of your search turned off to recognize the location from which you're searching from. The extra line on the region map, Dana, is probably the old line that had MACD's old address on it that I removed. That points to Lansing. Because Lansing is the state capital, but we used to have a physical location at MACD in Lansing, but now we're a completely distributed team. So I'm in Holland, Amber is up in the UP, Melissa Harris, who is the program coordinator for the WLEB farmer-led group, is over in the Thumb. Like I said, our executive committee is also all over the state. Jerry in Grand Rapids and Nancy on her farm, technically out in Otisville, but in Genesee County and Steve in Jackson County. So all of our team is distributed throughout the state. We don't have a physical location. What other questions do you guys have about either running for conservation district elections at your local level, running for state council if you're already a director and want to be a bigger part of the statewide leadership roles, or anything else at all? This is your open time to ask anything. Just put it right in the chat and I can respond. I will be sending out additional information after this, including I'll send out these slides. I'm also going to be sending out both the state council guide that shows what the responsibilities are in more detail of state council, as well as the director guide that is similar for directors, that gives a very high level view of what directors do at local conservation districts. So you'll be getting that information from me later today, and we'll also be sending out a copy of this recording. I would encourage anybody and everybody to share this with other people, either at your local conservation district, to get them excited and interested in being involved on a bigger level. Like I said, if they're already directors, or if you're already involved, but you're not a director, maybe you don't want to run to be a director, but you want to be involved, check with your conservation district to see if they have associate board members open. And then we'll go from there. Thomas, great question. How is MACD executive and state council funded? So like I said, we are a nonprofit. So we are funded in a couple of different ways. Number one is that we do have dues for conservation district membership. So all the conservation districts in the state pay some level of dues for support from MACD. That does not cover our entire budget. And we would not be able to provide everything that we do for districts just with conservation dues alone. So we do also have sponsorships from corporations and other organizations that sponsor either at the annual meeting, if they come as an exhibitor, or if they provide some other sponsorship level for our annual meeting, or there are general sponsorship opportunities for them throughout the year. And then we also hold some grants that are collaborative grants between multiple conservation districts or between multiple organizations within the state, where we're providing that coordination, and those grants cover the staff time for MACD to run and administer those grants. The executive committee and state council are unpaid positions. Our budget allows some reimbursement for expenses of mileage. And some local boards do provide a stipend for directors for meeting attendance, but that's on a board by board basis. So that's kind of the three pieces of funding: is membership dues from districts, grants, and then individual donations and sponsorships from individuals, organizations, and businesses. Great question. And definitely something I should add to these slides for the future. Any other questions from either those of you who are already, I think we've got about half and half of people who are already at districts and people who are brand new to districts. Can you speak to how MACD and regional councils advocate for greater state funding and touch on historic versus future state funding? Great question, Allegra. So MACD, the one piece that I didn't include on here is, in addition to the executive committee, is we do have other committees that are formed of directors throughout the state. Sometimes members of the committee are also independent partners, depending on the committee. So we have like a planning committee that plans annual conference, and we have a governance committee that manages governance, and development committee that figures out what benefits are provided. And one of those committees is the legislative committee. So we have a specific committee that plans the legislative action day every year, and that works on providing resources for districts to send to legislators, particularly on the state level. Now, this is one of the areas that boards of directors are really critical, because employees at districts can't directly lobby or advocate because a lot of their jobs are funded by state or federal dollars. So when you are an employee that is funded by state or federal dollars, that puts some limitations on how you can advocate directly to your legislators. So boards of directors, because they are also elected representatives, have a really key part to play in doing that outreach to legislators to help them understand the importance of conservation districts and our funding, and what we do with that money, and advocating for additional dollars. So a little bit of background, a little bit of history on conservation district funding. In 2008, during the Great Recession, conservation district funding on a state level was cut to zero. And so for a long period of time, conservation districts, which are mandated to exist, but not mandated to be funded by any particular branch of government, relied pretty exclusively on either grants or on their annual tree or plant sales in their local communities in order to have some operational funds to keep going. In 2022 fiscal year, the state of Michigan voted to appropriate $3 million for conservation districts. And so that funding has been consistent for the last 3 years of $3 million of funding, which translates to $40,000 per district of operational funds. And one of our key messages that we have, both the executive committee, the legislative committee, at our legislative action day, in my role in talking to legislators is to talk to them about the importance of increased operational funds for districts. Our goal is that we would have $13 million of operational funds for districts, which would be about $173,000 per year operational funds, which would give every district funding for a full-time district manager, for a full-time conservation planner, and to be able to have benefits for all their employees at the district, which would allow conservation districts to grow capacity throughout the state. So we have a lot of meetings individually with legislators. We send conservation districts materials to send out to their legislators. We also encourage conservation districts to invite their local and state legislators to events, to their annual meeting, to, conservation days and field days and workshops so that they can understand better how to reach out to their legislators. Julie said, do you have any standardized orientation materials or expectations for board members, or does each county develop their own? This is kind of a both and question. So MDARD, which is the Michigan Department of Agricultural and Rural Development, is the regulating body above conservation districts. So they are the ones who certify elections in each county. And so they do have standardized materials providing information about the legal expectations and requirements for conservation district boards. We also provide training for conservation districts at the annual meeting, and we're working in collaboration with MDARD to kind of restart some of the training that went away after COVID. And we're bringing that back full force. So we do have some orientation materials and some materials available both at MDARD and at MACD for boards, but boards also are responsible for developing some of their own internal policies as well. So there are templates that we can provide for some of those pieces, but it's a shared responsibility between MDARD, MACD, and local boards, and we're working on improving all of those things and making it more standardized and easier, which is part of the reason that we wanted to do this webinar as a starting point to start helping make sure that communities are aware of these positions and what's out there. Great questions. And this is the first time I've done this particular training webinar, so I'm sure all these questions are going to go into the version 2.0 when I do it again. Any other questions about any of the pieces of this? How many folks had signed up for this seminar? Great question. I had 72 people register the last I looked, which was a couple hours ago. So if we had any last minute sign-ons, there could be more, but that's how many people signed up for this Lunch and Learn event. And I am planning to do this on a regular basis. I don't know if I'm going to do it biannually or quarterly. Kind of depends on feedback from state council. Actually, we'll probably talk about that at our next state council meeting, and share that with them and say, how frequently do we want to do this live so we can answer questions? Because recordings are great, and there's also a value to having it live too. Julie, I love that suggestion that this presentation could be required viewing for new employees. Yes, I think we have great conservation district employees who are experts in their field and come in and do their job. And sometimes some of those layers of like how conservation districts work together are things that they don't know right in coming in to their first day in the job. So I love that. How long has MACD been around? So conservation districts were formed in the state of Michigan in 1937. My home district Ottawa was the first conservation district formed in the state. And then all of the other counties formed over the next few years. MACD, I believe, formed in 1945. I will have to double check that. But MACD is an organization formed pretty shortly after conservation districts as a whole formed. So we have been providing support to conservation districts all that time. And MACD as an organization has sometimes been larger or smaller in the past as, you know, funding has fluctuated and as needs of districts have fluctuated. But I've been really excited to see a lot of growth over the last couple of years. What is the likelihood of increased operational funding for CDs beginning on October 1? That's a great question. As I mentioned in response to Allegra's question, we've been working really hard on an executive committee level, on my level, to talk to legislators. So we have met with every single members of the Appropriations Committee on the House side to talk to them about district funding. There is a lot of support for additional funding for districts, and I think there's a general understanding that districts do need more funds and why it's important. It's a really tight state budget this year. So anybody who cares about conservation, feel encouraged to call your local legislators, especially all of those of you who are on this call that are learning about conservation district leadership, maybe for the first time. Call your local representative and tell them that you would love to see additional funding for conservation districts. And if you want more resources on that, I have a whole separate set of slides specifically on conservation district funding. Shoot me or Amber a message and we can share that presentation slides with you. That's what I've presented before a couple of different House committees when we've been testifying. So there's a lot of support and there's also a very tight budget. So we're all hoping and we're continuing to advocate, and we're just going to see what comes out of it. But I hope so. I think that there's a good chance that we will get some additional operational funding. And we'll just have to see what that looks like. Social media templates for advocating. There are not, but that is something that we could definitely create. Like I said, right now we have our presentation slideshow, and some of those could be pretty easily posted on social media. Again, conservation districts themselves can't directly say, please give us more funding, but board members can, and members of the public definitely can. When will the new website be up and running? The new website is up, the directory is running and is complete. We are actually, applications closed today. We are hiring for a part-time person to help build the MACD website out in more detail. Just because the capacity wise, I just have only 24 hours in a day. No matter how I try to slice it, I still can't find 40 hours in a day, which would be great. So we're hiring a part-time person that is going to help get that going. Any other questions? I really appreciate everybody who's here. I am thankful that you care about conservation districts and you care about local leadership. Like I said, you'll watch your email inbox because we'll be sending out a lot of additional information, including these slides and this recording afterwards for a follow-up. And I'm sure more questions will come up, and you can just feel free to reach out to myself, or like I said, Amber, if you can just throw your email in the chat as well so that people have that, and put mine in there too so they can just copy and paste it if they want to. The fastest solution is always just to copy me and Amber into an email, and then whoever of us has time first will get back to you, dependent on our meetings and everything else. All right, great. Well, thank you again, everybody, for being here. Feel free to reach out with additional questions afterwards. We'll let you have a few minutes of your lunch hour back, and hopefully you all learned something. And thank you for being a part of our Lunch and Learn today. And I hope I see you again at future events.